you hear me? Oh yeah, I can hear me. All right. Hey, what up? My name's Sean Laser. I'm here hanging with you guys today. Hey. All right. Thank you. Made me feel better. I'm serving right now over at Icon Plantation, and I saw some of my people in here. I'm like, dude, you got to put up with me again, right? They give me every Saturday at 8 p.m., which you can totally come and hang with us. We have a great time. But yeah, I'm actually happy to be here with you guys today. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm going to be doing a lot of sitting. I'm 29 now. I didn't think that's when I'd start feeling old, but it's when I'm starting to feel old. All right, I got 2 kids. They both weigh 30 pounds, and neither of them, well, one doesn't walk at all, and the other one doesn't want to walk. So all day like this, and sometimes like this with 2 60-pound babies in my arms, it's got me going all kinds of, groaning a lot. So with that said, we're going to be a little old school today too, because we're going to just go ahead and read the paper book. So if you've got one, or if you want to do it through your phone, totally fine. We don't have any slides today. We're going to be in the book of Galatians, chapter 1. And to be honest, you can also just listen. You don't have to plug in, because if your hearing's good, I think you'll learn something today, as I have. I've been waiting for a couple weeks now to teach on this, because this has been wrecking me for like easily this whole month. So I'm going to pray, and let's get into some good stuff that God has to say to us. God, I know that I'm not doing a lot of what I'm about to talk about. I don't make these adjustments all the time. I don't look at you the way that I see Paul here as he writes to the Galatians. I don't see you with that level of love and respect. I don't make the necessary changes in my life. I don't always repent. I don't always confess. But I definitely can say that I'm not where I was 8 years ago when you met me and when I met you. And God, I know that I can speak confidently right now, not as a man perfect, but as a man being perfected. And I believe that we all could benefit from these words today, right now. Would you please open our hearts and minds in those walled off parts of our hearts that just will not open. And I pray right now that those would open by a miracle, by your Spirit, so that we could absorb and derive nutrients from this text. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So Galatians chapter 1, keep going where Drew left off, which if you want to pray for Drew, he's got like 103-degree fever. He's coming down with something. So when you have kids, that happens. You get their sicknesses. So let's just read it, verse 11. But I make known to you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to man. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. Paul is so proud of the fact that he didn't get this information secondhand. If you remember his story, he got knocked down off a horse, had a full-blown encounter with Jesus. And in that moment, his life was changed. Now, why do I know his life was changed? Not because the text says it, but because the history books prove it. You've got a guy who is famous for his ability to kill a Christian, and now he's out there putting his life at risk to reach non-Christians, and reach outsiders, Gentiles, and to bring them into the faith that he once persecuted. That would be you switching political parties. That would mean you going from vegan to all day, all night at Burger King, right? This is a policy change. This is like nothing you would do, and everything that you wish people online would do, right? Because you're like, why don't they see things like me? Let me just send an angry message and see if I can bring them to Jesus, right? It doesn't work that way, but I feel the same way sometimes. And so for him to make that adjustment is already impressive. But he didn't make the adjustment by what he believed. I just want you to think about this for a second. Belief is a powerful thing. Many Christians have been martyred for their faith. Many people of many faiths have been martyred for their faith. That's significant. Honestly, that to me, like I think of why God allowed the human to experience suffering to the level that we do. Like, I get it. I have back pain. It's God's way of saying, dude, let your wife carry one of the kids, right? I get that. I know why that happens, okay? It's a life lesson. It's teaching me. It's training me. Pain does phenomenal things in that way. But you ever think just why, if I was creator God, like I would give pain like a ceiling. Like, but you know, if you've ever been through a real rough life stage, bad breakup, bad physical ailment, like there's just pain that's undescribably painful. And it goes to a place where it's like, does this even top out? And yet, God allowed that to exist. You just think about that. Why? Evolution wouldn't have even created something, on its own to that degree. Like, just extreme, excruciating, destructive pain that cripples and depresses. And yet, it's in our capacity to feel it. I wonder, and I'm not smart enough to know, but you ever wonder if maybe because the church grew so much by the blood of the martyrs in the first century, that's what locked in the faith that we believe. You and I are Christians today because there's a bunch of people that died back then. And I wonder if it's because people looked on and said, that guy's getting eaten by a lion in a coliseum. What does he know that I don't know? And he's doing it willingly. What the heck is that, right? He's not in there feeling a pain that is tolerable and yet is doing it willingly. I don't know. But I just wonder, because he died for what he saw. Belief is strong. But for what you saw, I've heard people say this, and I think it's a bunk argument, but they go, yeah, I bet that this whole Christian thing anyway, man, come on, Sean, let's be real. It's like a feel-good thing. We promote it as Americans because it gets people to be generous and nice. Dude, you come up to me with a gun at my head, and you say, did you make that up? If I made it up, I'm going to say it. Yeah, bro, I'm sorry. I totally didn't mean it. Jesus isn't real. None of those things happened. Don't shoot, right? But this guy died a martyr's death because he saw something. It's pretty significant. If you're in the room and you're not a Christian, I completely understand. I wasn't a Christian. I didn't grow up Christian. I get that. But I don't know what to do with that. He saw something. He just saw something. And you can't doubt it. And not only him, but of his 12 disciples, the majority of them were martyred. So they all got the gun to their head, right? And actually it's even worse because there's a sword to their stomach. So think about that, right? Think about what that feels like. Think about what the threat of being hung or crucified feels like. And then wonder, what would you do if you were making up the religion? I think most of us would back down. And then we continue in verse 13. For you have heard of my former conduct in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God beyond measure and tried to completely destroy it. And I advanced in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous for the traditions of my fathers. Verse 15. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me through his grace to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood. He's saying, guys, I was like at the top of the chain in this thing, man. Like I literally was doing it like nobody else knew how to do it. I was being paid by the religious system, right, the temple system at the time, to persecute Christians. I think most of us might take on a job if it's like, wait, good, solid pay, and I get to call out and hurt the people that I don't like. Don't raise your hand, but somebody in here is as sick as me, and we go, wait, where are they offering that, right? Like, where do I apply? Do I have to start with an internship, or can I jump full in and kill them, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, torture first and then? So he's doing, and these are the days where it's like, big deal. You need a job to survive. No social security here going on. And he's doing what he loved. And he was ranked in it. He was up there. He was the best of the best. And he gave that up. He took a U-turn. He changed. That's a lot to give up. I mean, I've given up less for God, and I have repeat thoughts like, I used to make more money back then, though. But she was pretty cool. But I'd probably move back to that state. But I know beyond a doubt, I'm called to marry the woman I married. I'm called to be in South Florida. I'm called to work here, and yet I still have doubts. I don't know what this guy felt. I don't know if Paul ever felt doubts, but man, he made that U-turn and lost a lot. And I wonder what we've lost in some of our U-turns. You see, he did things a little different. I don't know what I would have done in his situation, but it says here that the very next verse 17, he said, I didn't confer with flesh and blood. What he's saying is, I didn't go to a bunch of people, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went to Arabia and returned again to Damascus, which is in Syria, the capital of Syria. What's he saying? Well, he's saying, I didn't go to where all the people were that were big-time Christians. He became a Christian, and he didn't immediately start trying to grow up the ladder. You know what I'm saying? He didn't try to say, hey, apostles, yo, remember me? I used to kill you. Yeah, can I preach at your church? Now, that sounds weird, but wouldn't you want a guy like that to preach at your church? Like, if you had one, you'd be like, dude, come on in, man. You're like what we all want. Like, we want to see stories of transformation. But he didn't do that at all. He did two things I highly recommend if you have never explored faith and you think about putting your toe in the water, okay?
I would recommend this. If you are about to need to make a U-turn because of the conviction of this text, as I've had to because of reading this, I would recommend you do these two things as well. He went to Arabia, a place that had very few Christians, right? More famous now for being a Muslim territory. He went there, not with the apostles, and it sounds to me like he did one of two things. He either was there serving the Gentiles that were the people who didn't know God, or he was just silent. That he spent a period of time almost like considering what just happened. And some of us jump in. I don't know if you're already a Christian. I remember I jumped in with both feet. I'm like, let's do this. Like, I'm sick of working at the bar. I want to get to know Christians. I want to get a Christian wife. Like, I already knew a lot of what I wanted because I had some of it when I was a kid. And I knew the values and I knew what it was worth. And so I just wanted to jump in. But Paul doesn't do that. He goes, no, hold on. Like, let me soak this in. Let me serve. Let me be silent. I used to be a bartender in the state of Maryland where I'm from. And I remember when I started the way I became saved or a person who followed God was because I had a girlfriend at the time who was cheating on me, bad for me completely. But she still was like a Christian, which kind of made me not want to be a Christian for a little while. But she basically was like, yo, let's go to a Christian bookstore. I'm thinking, okay, why? So I'm in there and I grabbed this book and it's called Unleashing Courageous Faith. And it's this book about just masculinity. And I thought, like, I'm a pretty masculine guy. I mean, I'm Brazilian. I'm super hairy. I'm a bartender. Like, I have a deep voice. Like, I don't know about this. But I couldn't get off the fact that the cover had this really cool, like, chainmail, coat of arms looking thing. I'm like, bought it for the cover. As I'm reading it, there's a version of masculinity. I remember reading it before the bar would open, after I had set up all the bar stools and wiped down the counter. I would just start reading before the people would start to come. And I just remember reading about a masculinity I didn't know anything about. I didn't know anything about this description of putting people first. And it wasn't like, holding doors for grandma stuff. It was like, what does it mean to be an authentic, masculine person in this world, living completely for others, not thinking about self, not thinking about posturing and progressing, and all the things that in my mind were like ultimate values. It was this selfless thing that I just never seen in my family. I never seen it out there. I never saw it at the church I think I grew up in. Maybe it was there, I didn't notice it. And yet, I was completely, deeply convicted. I thought, man, I want this. I just need this. I don't know where to get this, but I need this. And it was in that process that I started to make a change. It wasn't sudden, but I knew at some point I would probably have to quit working at the bar, and in 3 months I did. And in that 3 months, I went to my pastor at the church that I grew up in, and I was like, hey, I'm that kid that got kicked out of high school ministry because I used to try to hook up with the girls. And that's not how I said it, but that did actually happen. Somebody called me out for that, and I had to stop going to the church for a little bit on my own choice because I was mad. But I'm like, what can I do? And literally, the only thing they'd let me do was pray. Because they're like, we can't serve with women. I'm like, why not? I can't figure that out. So there's this plaque that had like all these people that had signed up for prayer time slots for a kid who was my little brother's friend who had cancer. And so it had to be like a middle school kid with cancer. And they're like, well, you can pray in any of these available time slots. I'm like looking at the list and I'm saying, 2 a.m.? Church is open at 2 a.m.? They're like, yeah, you can come and pray at 2 a.m. But how am I going to pray at 2 a.m.? And then he hands me the key, thinking, that was a bad idea. But okay, like, I'll do it. So I literally remember, I only did it once. I'm not that holy to do it twice. And I just came one time to the church. I'm like, this has got to be a gag key. Like, dude is not dumb enough to let me in. And I literally got into the church, 2 a.m., smaller church. I don't think you can get the key here. I wouldn't try. You ain't getting nothing. But we got like a SWAT team here. You seen these guys with these guns? Anyways, so I'm in this much smaller church. In this room, the candle's still lit from, I guess, the person praying before. And I just start praying. And I wish I could tell you, like I had this vision or this moment. I fell asleep, flat out. Fell asleep, woke up. Couldn't tell you when I woke up. Probably was only like 20 minutes later, but I felt tons of guilt and shame, right? I was like, that's a big no-no. I know enough church to know you don't sleep when you pray, all right? So, and I'm at the church sleeping while I'm praying, but they put pillows in there, and then the vibe, I'm just saying, somebody just doesn't know that when you lay on a pillow, you sleep. But that was the start of my U-turn because it was fundamentally different than everything that I had been doing, right? It had nothing to do with posturing myself, making progress, making more money, finding a girl. Like, it was different. It was just different than what I normally do. And I think, even though I can't tell you something super miraculous happened, I think that was the start of my change. And there's somebody in here who you know you need to make a change, or maybe you've even tried some little things or some little prayers or some like, yo, but like I went to a church and I don't know, I like went to the front and I was expecting, right? And I guarantee you I expected that. I mean, there were candles, like if spiritual things happen around candles, right? But nothing happened. And I think that was exactly what I needed. I just needed to make a U-turn, and that was the call of God in that moment. So you need to just be silent and serve. And that's all I did. That's all I did. And you know what? 3 months later, I gathered up enough courage to say I'm going to leave this job. And then a couple weeks later, I gathered enough courage to move from Maryland to move down to South Florida, where the only thing I really knew is I had a cousin, and he had a good church, and that's how I came to be at Calvary. And within the first couple times that I came here, I started to follow Jesus, like full-blown, like committed, went forward, like the whole thing. So it was an adjustment, and I think that was what Paul made. And we keep reading here, and we just see this completely different way of doing life. Then he goes, after 3 years, he goes up to Jerusalem to see Peter, and he hangs out with him. He remains with him for 15 days. That's verse 18. Then verse 19, but I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. He said, well, hey, Sean, I thought you said that he didn't go meet with the main guys. Well, this is 3 years later, okay? If he wanted to get in the door and get a good teaching opportunity and get paid, he should have probably gone sooner. Like, hey, I just got converted yesterday. I'm ready to start sharing the gospel now. But 3 years later now, the first people he wants to meet with are these two guys. Peter, who's basically being hunted in the city of Jerusalem to be killed, right? Because the church was persecuted at the time. So he goes and risks 15 days of his life to go hang out with this guy who was with Jesus. Don't know what they talked about. And then he goes to find James. I think that makes a ton of sense. Because James is Jesus' brother. Now let me ask you a question. Who here has siblings? Siblings? Okay. For you who raise your hand, what would it take for your brother to convince you that he's God's son? Bro, you got to start flushing the freaking toilet first, okay? You know what I mean? You got to stop stealing money from my wallet. You got to stop, you know what I'm saying? There's just some things that right, I mean, that's, okay, I'm sorry, I'm confessing. But that's legit, you're not perfect, you know? But for this dude, I'm just sorry, I'm going to add another case in case you're not following Jesus. Again, I get it. I made fun of Christians, but I see something there that just makes too little sense for somebody to just make up that their brother is God. That can't be. Right? For you to convince that your brother is God, you had to see something. Not just believe something, but see something. James saw something. And you can tell because these guys, all these guys, after Jesus was killed, they were all hiding. They're not out there preaching. I don't know if you know that. They weren't out there bold like you would imagine. They're hiding. And then only when he comes back to life and they see him and touch the holes in his hands, all of a sudden these guys get crazy. They start going out there preaching, start visiting each other in the city where Jesus was killed. You want to be hanging out in the place where your best friend was killed? I ain't going to that hood, right? Staying out of there, right? They know me. And they're there. And everyone knew Peter knew Jesus because he was the guy that they're like, don't you know Jesus? No. Don't you know Jesus? No. They knew he was Jesus' buddy. So, and these guys all die a martyr's death because of something they saw. Fascinating. So what's he doing? I think he's choosing his friends. I got another tip for you, man. If you're going to choose Jesus, you gotta start shaking some old friendships. I had to shake the bar scene. I'm not here to tell you if you're a bartender right now, you cannot follow Jesus. That's not it at all. That was my conviction, and I stood on that because that's all I knew I had to do at that moment. But with that said, that scene was no good for me, right? And it was good to push me into what real masculinity was. It was an Irish pub, and all these Irish guys thought that drinking darker beer meant you were more man. And I just started to believe it, right? And, it'll grow hair on your chest. I'm like, nah, give me that Miller Lite. I don't want more hair on my chest. But I really, it was what showed me that I didn't know what a man was. And yet these guys had no character. And being around them and the scene was no good for me. So I had to shake that off. And it's because I did, honestly, and I met a couple good people, and I made the move down here to Florida and found this amazing church. That's why I'm a Christian today. You are exactly who your 5 closest friends are. It's just a statistic. That, and that may be I think I heard that in a commercial. Shake that, please. Turn it off. I don't care who said that. This is profound. You are who your 5 friends are. Guys, that's significant. You want to know another one? This one, literally psychology had to prove this one. Like, this is, Freud was trying to create a concept around this, and it's not going to sound at all deep when I say it. But if you chew on this, man, this is going to be like that bubble gum that gets better with time. Okay, you're going to have to think this through. Ready? The best predictor of your future behavior is your past behavior. Now, someone's in here and like, no, you're right, that's not profound. Okay, but it is. And the reason I say that, and this actually rubs Christians a lot of times the wrong way, it's like, but with Jesus, and it's like, no, I get that. That's true. But with all the Jesus in me, when I'm at the bar and I'm smelling that smell and I'm in that place with that same music, you know what I want to do, right? What I always done. So if you're not changing your environment, I'm sorry, you are not fighting the good fight. Like, I'm just going to call it out. That literally Hebrews says, there's a point in the author of Hebrews says, you haven't even gotten to the point of shedding your own blood over sin. Now, he's not recommending cutting, like, that's not it. What he's saying is, you're here saying, I don't want to keep doing that, but you haven't cost yourself a thing. You haven't felt any pain. You haven't even deleted that app off your phone. Who are you fooling? Don't pray. Do what he said. Change. You know what I'm saying? Like, then pray. Pray with the app off your phone, right? Pray. I got Safari blocks on my phone. I cut off friendships, man. I did crazy things. Got rid of my social media. I'm not prescribing any of this. I just know that I'm a sinner. And I know that it's true what psychology has discovered, which is, again, super not fascinating. But really, you're going to do what you've always done unless you change something, right? It's got to put you in a different situation because you're you. And that's dangerous. If, you're like me at least. So he chose his friends wisely. He chose only 2 friends, man. 2 friends, 3 years. Like, this guy knew how to go deep with a few friends. And I don't think a lot of times we see the value in that. I'm like a 25 best friend guy. And my wife is like a 1 super deep friend kind of girl. And I've learned a lot from her, watching the value of going deep. I'm like, yeah, but you get more experience when you can learn from 25 people who've experienced 25 kinds of lives. But I see now, just from watching and observing, she has it better than me. And I'm not saying you can't have a lot of friends and you can't be super social, you can't be like that, but I am telling you, she's onto something that I'm just now getting the whiff of, that there's something about choosing a few good friends and just going deep with them, just doubling down on that hand. You know what I'm saying? So let's go into verse 20. Now, concerning the things which I write to you, indeed, before God, I don't lie. Afterward, I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia. And this is back to Arabia. So he goes back into the wilderness, basically, either serving or being silent. And he goes, I was unknown by face to the churches of Judea, which were in Christ. He goes, man, they didn't even know my face in the churches that really were happening, right? No mega churches knew about this guy. I mean, they heard about him, but nobody got to see his face. That means he didn't go there and preach. He didn't go there and get paid. You know what Paul had to do? He went from being the guy who got to do what he loved, to hurt the people he hated, and then he had to go into what? Do you know what Paul ended up having to do? Manual labor, tent making, okay? That's a sacrifice. I mean, I thought it was a sacrifice to go from the bar scene to something different, but I see now that it paid off. And I wonder if Paul would say the same thing. I mean, he wrote all the books in the New Testament, not all. He wrote a significant number of the books in the New Testament, and he says, like, I've learned the secret of being content. So I think Paul would say he made a good sacrifice. But I don't typically see people that go from the kind of work like I'm doing right now to say, manual labor would be fun, right? It's almost always the other way. It's, I do manual labor now, so I want to manage a bunch of manual labors. Or I want to go do something that involves my mind or do school or anything to get my hands out of the mud. And he does the opposite. He walks backwards because he knows where he's going. And then he goes this, but they were hearing only, he who formerly persecuted us now preaches the faith which he once tried to destroy. And they glorified God in me. That's it, man. That was all that was said of him. He didn't go in and preach his 45-minute sermons. He just let his reputation, his consistency, his repentant life, his new changed life sing its own song. And songs sing loud. And songs are catchy. And songs move. And songs cover ground. This was the song they were singing. The man who used to kill is now putting himself at risk of being killed for the cause. And we switch causes, and it don't mean anything but changing who you hashtag in your posts, right? you used to be vegan, and now you're all about, eating a different kind of way, or maybe it's usually the other way around, right? That's the trend. It's like you used to be a meat eater, and now you're vegan, so now it's hashtag vegan instead of like hashtag steak or whatever you do. So it doesn't cost us anything. It's just who I'm going to talk to, who's in my friend circle, which CrossFit gym I apply to, a bunch of vegan ones. Like, it doesn't cost us nothing, right? It's nothing. And yet, Paul, it cost him leaving his hometown, going to hang out in Arabia, right? Like, this dude has taken incredible risks and incredible loss of position, popularity, finances to take on this thing. It makes me believe this guy believed that he saw something. He didn't believe something. He saw something. And what about you? Where is it that you need to make that U-turn? Right? Not everyone here is a bartender that's going to go work at a church, okay? Get that clear. But I've had to make multiple U-turns throughout my entire life, and they're all the hardest thing to do. In fact, this is fantastic. In case you've never, just tried to been faithful to God and do things you're supposed to do, I get this text the other day, which basically combines perfectly with this content. And it's, I had read this before. There's a Christian author, his name is C.S. Lewis. And bro, if you're going to read a book, okay, read a Lewis book, so good. But he says this in his book, Mere Christianity. But progress means getting nearer to the place. Oh, he goes, we all want progress, Lewis writes in Mere Christianity, book 1, chapter 5. But progress, I'm just reading what it says, all right, so you know I didn't make this up. But progress means getting nearer to the place where you want to be. And if you have taken a wrong turn, then to go forward doesn't get you any nearer. Let that sink in. If you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the man who turns back sooner is the progressive man. What? He says in the same book, he goes, if you're doing a math problem and you mess up anywhere in the middle, you don't just say, I'm going to do better, and keep going, right? Because what happens when you finally get to the end? It's all wrong. It's all wrong. And that's the hardest thing. I honestly think, I've felt some pain and persecution of being a Christian, probably minor compared to these guys in the Bible, but easily the hardest thing for me, because I think I have a script in my mind that goes forward, faster, farther. Like, more money, more opportunity, more position. Like, that's just, I've already kind of betrayed that part of my heart. But this is completely backwards, saying, no, wait. There's times you got to turn around. You got to slow down your progress. You got to go backwards. And then in his other book, or essay, Evil and God, chapter called Evil and God, Lewis states this: there is no sense in talking of becoming better if better simply means what you are already becoming. It's like patting yourself on the back because you reached your destination, and you define your destination as the place you finally made it to. What he's saying is like you can't just do that. Like, oh, I reached my destination. Well, what was your destination? Where were you trying to go? Wherever I ended up. Is that a journey? Is that progress? No, that's wandering. That's just wandering. And in this concept, I've been called out a couple different times by God. First, that leaving the bar scene. I remember now living here in a roommate situation, and that was another huge U-turn. This one, actually, God did something a little unusual for me to wake up. But I'm living with a roommate, and he was a bartender. I don't know why I circle myself with these guys, but he had just a liquor cabinet full, which was, I never really dabbled in his stuff or wanted to, but it wasn't good for me, especially because I was now trying to serve at the church. I was serving here with kids, and I was like, God, dude, I'm trying to stay away from that. Can you at least keep that closed? And he's leaving stuff out on the counter, and then there's some weird things that happen. But primarily, it was just him constantly trying to push me. You've probably felt if you ever tried to walk the right path and people trying to drag you down the wrong one. You ever feel that pressure of dude, you didn't give me a hard time about skipping the club scene ever before, and now that I'm trying to be right and trying to go to church, you can't go without me. How'd that happen? And that was him. That was kind of pulling me a little bit. And eventually I had this dream because I kept resisting it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to leave. I'm fine. I'm not sinning. I'm not doing anything. But I think God knew I would eventually start to go backwards. And I had this vivid dream and I would call it a vision, where I felt God. I say God because somebody pulled me out of my bed. It's one of those freaky things like, dude, someone's in my room. I really thought I was like awake. It was like a lucid dream. And a voice in my room, deep as heck, just was like, you leave here, sell your furniture, which I'm like, sell my furniture? Or give away your furniture and forgive your dad. Like, what in the world is that, right? Like, and then I woke up and I thought about it and I was like, that's got to be God, because I never get out of a dream panting and freaking out. Like, what was that? So I told him, like, dude, I'm going to move. I gave my furniture to Calvary because I didn't know anything else to do with it. And I got to tell you what happened with my furniture. I had this, like, I don't know, the time it was cool to have, like, black IKEA furniture and, like, red leather accents in your house. I don't know if that, like, is still the thing. I had, like, one of these IKEA pictures with a big red bus on a black and white background. And it was just like, who in the world let me pick out? But I'm a single guy, so you do what I want. And I didn't have a woman to tell me that was wrong. I even had people like, it's a lot of red. You know, all these red leather chairs. I didn't even know, like, if they wanted them. But a bunch of people from Patmos picked them up. And so that was a ministry that had served me at one point later on, and or before. And so anyway, one day I'm at the Patmos property, this missionary training school, and I'm like, that's my table and my chairs. And people are like, oh, you're the guy. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like they were on sale. But they were there in that house being used. And then I heard a girl that had graduated Patmos like, you know where I saw your red bar stool? And I'm like, tell me. And it was the former pastor's wife sat on it for like this big women's conference. I'm like, she sat on my red chair? And I'm like, okay, you know. So God wanted my furniture for something. And then the forgive my dad makes a lot more sense the older I am. Like, I did have a lot of bitterness towards my father, and I needed to forgive him. But there wasn't anything really unusual to that. I was just like, okay, God, I'm forgiving my dad now. Thanks. Amen. It's like, that's how you end that, I guess. But later on, like, now my relationship with my dad is better than it's ever been. But obviously, you know, like you ever have experienced with your family, there's always challenges. And then there the most recent was, well, there are two at least recently. One was 2 years ago. I was starting to be fast-tracked in the church world to be a church planter. And that's sexy terminology around here. Like, that's like starting your own business in the church world, right? And at the same time, there was four of us. And we're all in this little, like, cohort of, like, guys that are going to go plant churches. And I'm going to go plant in Miami. It's, like, uncharted territory. I'm really excited. And it's going great. And then I'm getting called out by God on a sin that I'm committing. And I just, this is a thing that's been an ongoing issue for me, but it's something I keep on the front burner. I keep confessing and keep honestly just keep working on it, and I'm experiencing freedom. But I was just sharing it on purpose, like, with somebody, and like, yeah, bro, I've been struggling with this. He's like, dude, you should tell one of the leaders. And so I'm like, okay, well, I should have already done that because I know better. I work here at the church. But I went and told not necessarily the leader that I probably should have told. I just went and told another leader. And I realized I do this thing. It's primarily because growing up I had some bad conflict with my own father and in some cases with teachers, male teachers. I had this issue where I don't ever want to be called out by male authority. I deal with a lot of shame. So I didn't go to the one that I should have told because I saw him as a dad, to be honest. That's what I've come to learn. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I went to another person, and this guy goes, okay, well, but at least you've told the person you should have told, right? I was like, yeah. And I lied right through my teeth. And I'm like, I got to call this guy before he does. So I call him only an hour later, and he's like, yeah, I heard you were struggling again. You know who told me, right? I was like, dude, horrible. Bad call, right? I mean, so dumb. But it was incredibly trust-breaking, right? I mean, send you out to plant a church, you can't even keep your accountability on tight. Like, John, you're gonna have to take a break. And you're like, this is terrifying. Because my whole life, after the bar scene, all I've experienced is progress. I mean, I made more before I became a church worker, but in the church world, I felt enough joy that it compensated for the pay. And ever since then, it's just been constant upgrowth. And I'm going, hold on, what is happening right now? I'm like on hold. These other guys go plant churches. I'm not allowed to. In fact, I'm like not allowed to do a lot of things. I'm not allowed to teach. I'm not allowed to do anything. I'm on like complete and utter hold, and I freak out. Like, I'm shaking like to my core. I'm like, my voice is shaking my whole first week. Like, now I have to talk to my wife about how it's deceptive, and she's even disappointed. Like, how did that happen? And I'm like, I don't know. And so this whole thing just wrecking me. And for an entire year, I come to this place of like, just my worst fear happened. I wasn't making progress. I didn't even know how big a deal that was to me until it was taken away. And there's some things in our lives that until it's gone, you don't even know it's a God. Right? Until it's gone, you don't even know it's a God. But for me, it was about leveling up in my faith, leveling up in the way they look at me, leveling up. And I love what Drew said last week, and I'll say it again. You are not saved because of the level of your faith, but because of the object of your faith. We are not saved because we're constantly leveling up, getting deeper, getting more spiritual. It's because of who saved us. But I needed the gospel right then and there as a church-working, teaching guy. Like, that was where I needed the gospel. So that my entire year was gospel-soaked. Like, God was just wrecking me, refining me, U-turning me. I had to start all the way over. I'm not even on the church planning anything right now. Like, I haven't progressed even close to that. And I'm not even as aspirational because now I know I don't need it, which has been really freeing. All that said, it was only a couple months after that, my daughter starts having health issues. Those progress. My daughter now spends months in the hospital, and we get diagnosed with an incredibly complicated genetic disease that is going to last her whole life. I just want you to know, if I church planted, the way it was going to go for me was I was going to come out from under the wing of Calvary, have no insurance, and do that thing on my own, trying to plant a church and get money out of that to make my living. Okay? My daughter has racked up over $2 million in medical bills. What would my life look like? And I'm not just saying that's the only reason. I think God needed to mess me up. I think I was a prideful jerk. But that aside, he saved my wife and my life and my family and my kid. All of that. All of it. It was a horrible U-turn. It was painful. I told you this is hard. But it was the best thing for me. And I didn't even know it. So what U-turn is it in your life that you're resisting? Like, no. I mean, it couldn't possibly be. No, I'm not going to go back to that person and have that conversation. I haven't seen them in how long? Do you really want me to? Man, guys, I've had to do the most embarrassing things. It's like, if you have anyone, nobody's going to raise their hands, but if you've ever been to AA, I have. It's fantastic. This idea of making amends, going back to people and having to make a phone call, having to have a conversation. Man, I wish that was part of our normal rhythms as Christians, because that's exactly what had to happen for me multiple times throughout my life. Like, call people that I didn't even have their numbers. I had to find their numbers just to get right, just to get back to where God last spoke to me. So my new one right now is not nearly as dramatic as my last one, but as part of managing our children, now I have 2 children with the same genetic disease. My wife and I are carriers. They need to be fed through a tube at night, and I have a night nurse. And we had some bad experiences with certain nurses, but we finally got one. And the way I knew it was her was I woke up in the morning, I was like, everything was okay? Like, they survived, because they die in the night if they don't get fed. And she's like, boy, I was praying all night for these kids. She had the Bible open, and she was like, Pentecostal. I'm like, we're keeping you. And it was like, oh man, praise God. So it was awesome. And dude, 2 days later, she brings in like this, I got something for you. And this is the first time I seen her shy, because she's, Pentecostal people ain't shy. And I'm like, what is it? And she opens up this whiteboard, and it's like this prayer board. And it's all these ways you pray for a sick kid, and you pray against the work of the devil. And she prays against the work of the devil. Let me tell you, she will pray, and she makes me feel like I'm not even saved. Like, but dude, I'm telling you, this has only been the last week that this has been going on. And she's like, and you know what, guys? When I get here at 10 o'clock, we're going to pray for a half hour together. I'm like, no, you're crazy. I hired you so I could sleep. You kidding? If I wanted to pray, I would have called a pastor. Oh, and she goes, I'm the master intercessor at my little church. And I'm like, man, and she is the master intercessor, because she's got my wife and I praying and crying, and just like, it's so awesome. It's so awesome. But guys, I did not think 8 years into working at a church, I would need a U-turn in my prayer life. Like, let me just tell you straight. I literally thought, like, prayer is so easy. Like, it's just easy. And I didn't realize I don't know how to pray. I pray like nothing is ever going to happen. I don't pray anything for my family like this woman prayed for my family, and she's broken open a new category. I call her my category buster. She's been breaking all the rules. Just glad she's not breaking my stuff. But it's great. It's great. And all that to say is you can learn a new thing right now. You may be, Sean, it's great, but I'm good. But dude, go back to the last time you heard God. And he's probably been talking to me about prayer for the longest. But I'm like, no, God, I got that. I'm good. And now he's bringing me back, and he needed to bring a Pentecostal woman to my house. So before God's got to move in somebody into your house to wake you up, the moral of the story is make that turn, right? Make that turn. Let's let the progress go. I know it's going to hurt. I know it might slow you down. I know you might get in trouble. I know you might get arrested. I don't care. It's fact. It's better to get it out now because guess what? Everything in darkness will eventually come to... Why aren't you up here preaching? Okay, here's the deal. We're going to have a band come out. And we're going to have a moment of just music worship. There's going to be prayer counselors up here at the front. And they're going to be ready and willing and available to pray with you. And if you're going to come up, I'd recommend you to come up not like Paul could have to the most popular of the apostles at the time and posture himself and like, yo, but to come humbly like he came 3 years later and be like, is this real? Can you pray with me? I think there's a U-turn I needed to make a long time ago. I need to make it now. I need to get saved. I need to ask this Jesus to change me. I cannot keep going the way I'm going. I need to move. I need to go. I need to grow. If that's you, up here is where you got to be. Or in your seat and just do it genuinely. But man, if you posture yourself before God like that, he could do what only he could do. He could save you, your family, save you from $2 million worth of insurance payments too. So what we're going to do is ask the bands to come out. And I'm going to pray as they come out and prepare, and then we're going to be here available to pray for you after. Let's go there together. God, I want a life that is as powerful as Paul's. I could just keep going. I just know how to keep going and keep pretending and keep putting on a face. I do it so good, God, but I hate that about me. Hate that I'm okay with that. And I don't want to be okay with that anymore. So God, even now, God, if it's not just prayer this week that you had in mind for me to learn, then teach me something else. Teach me something now. We need it. We need it. It's different. It's countercultural. It's not fun or comfortable. But God, I have got to keep growing. Because if I stay here, I die. And I know that. I know there's no place for a plant to stop growing. I know there's no place for anything that's living to stay the same always. And so why should I, in my spiritual walk, be allowed to stay stagnant and not die? Lord, thank you for teaching us through nature that things that stay the same all go to rot. And let us be revived in this new idea, this new mental picture of what you could possibly do with our lives surrendered. I pray you'd bring the right people up forward right now for whatever they need. Let this moment be holy and soaked in prayer and full of life change. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears.
to pray for you. So we're just going to keep playing, but you are free to go. We love you, and we will see you next week.